So we've had a pretty good college football weekend, a underrated college football weekend, I would say, back in week number 3. And even though it was a weekend in which we did not see any top 25 matchups happen, we've seen some teams really show themselves a little bit more, getting some more information on various teams. Some that's good, of course, and some that is, of course, not as good. So that has been reflected in this Any Given Saturday power ratings. Now, quick disclaimer before I jump into this alliteration of the Any Given Saturday power ratings going into week number 4. So these power ratings would, to me, determine who would be favored over whom if they were playing on a neutral side field. And this is also based on what these teams have currently done as of right now. This power rating poll doesn't necessarily project into the future. We just look at what they're doing right now because we're about a month into the season now. So a lot of the preseason data is not very relevant at this point because now we actually have 3 or 4 games in which these teams have played. So we have plenty of information on these guys. And even though it is a long college football season, this is where I would have those teams power rated as of right now. So all that considered, let's go ahead and dive into what we have going on with the Any Given Saturday power ratings going into week number 4. And we'll start from the bottom and we will begin to work our way up. Now, you guys can read. I think some of you, or at least all of us here, know how to see who is going to be playing against whom. Now, we'll start from 25, work our way up from 21. So I'm just going to talk about some notable teams on this list. So starting from 21 to 25, this is what those teams currently are. And what we see right off the get-go is that we're only going to have one new team in this power rating poll, and that is actually going to be the Florida Gators. Florida was not ranked going into their matchup against Tennessee. That applies to both the AP poll as well as the power rating poll as well, but they keep that win streak alive in terms of beating Tennessee in the Swamp. It was a game that really Billy Napier needed to win. They had to find a way to win this game, and Florida was able to do that. Not only does that give that a little bit more national respect, as Florida is ranked number 25 in the entire country, but what we also get to see is Billy Napier's seat gets a little bit cooler as of right now. I think if this was a game where Florida did end up losing, I'm sure there was going to be some tough questions being asked down in Gainesville, but Florida found a way to get the win. They bounced back from their loss from earlier this season against Utah. Now they focus in on Charlotte. They have one last tune-up in that Charlotte game before they get into the rest of their SEC schedule. Now, we continue to move through this top 25. We now go from 16 to 20, and from here on out, we see a little bit more of movement. Tennessee, Alabama, and Michigan, those are 3 teams as of note. Tennessee, I think we know why we saw them fall 5 spots. It was a notable change between now and last week. Tennessee losing on the road to an unranked Florida team. Yeah, I hate to see it. And it was a team that started off somewhat strong. They put up plenty of points against Virginia. So it looked like it was going to be as explosive an offense as last season, but as they dive in, haven't looked great against Austin Peay. And then now they have their first loss of the season. So they fall down 5 spots because of that, but they weren't even the worst looking SEC team, in my opinion. That's power rated in this top 25. Alabama, I had ranked number 12 in the country in these power rating polls after their first loss of the season to Texas. They went on the road for the first time this season, and they took on Southern Florida. Now, this game was a lot more competitive than what many people thought could have possibly made it happen. And it's not even that we found out that Tyler Buchner was not really the guy. This was something that I talked about in the SEC preview going into this season. I wasn't that big on Alabama from a conference championship, national championship perspective, because they brought in Tyler Buchner, and I was never big on Tyler Buchner. He had 3 touchdowns, 5 interceptions last season, and we saw him get his first start against USF, and he did not look good. He showed a lot of why Notre Dame went into the transfer portal, why they got Sam Hartman, and yeah, so Alabama, they fall down 6 spots. They did beat USF. It was only 17-3 though. What's really scary about that particular game, it's not even that the quarterbacks were bad. I think they do realize that Milrose does need to be the starting quarterback for Alabama moving forward. But there were times where USF straight up looked more physical than University of Alabama. I mean, we had USF guys running over Alabama players, a few times. I mean, it's not that Alabama wasn't a more physical team overall. I think they were, but just the fact that you're seeing Alabama players getting ran over by teams that are not even the best in their own conference in the group of 5. Southern Florida, I don't think has those expectations to win the American Conference necessarily. So really concerned by Alabama. They play against Ole Miss this upcoming week, and we're going to talk about that Ole Miss game a little bit later. And then we got Michigan. Michigan played against Bowling Green. They were in a dogfight against Bowling Green. Don't get it twisted. This was a closer game than what people realize. It was 7-6 midway through the second quarter. J.J. McCarthy did not have a good game, and I don't know if it was one of those things where Michigan is kind of overlooking their schedule, looking later on. They can't play like that in Big Ten conference action because Rutgers is a little bit better of a team than what people realize. Not saying that Michigan will lose to Rutgers, but I certainly think it could be a closer game than what the spread is currently showing right now. So Michigan, hopefully with the addition of Jim Harbaugh coming back, he has finished serving his suspension. If not, that could be a major problem for the Michigan Wolverines. Because if not, then, I mean, this is a team that's trying to make it its 3rd playoff appearance in the last 3 years. That could be a problem as they go up against more of the top flight teams in the country, such as an Ohio State and a Penn State. So Michigan, we'll see how their effort is this coming week against Rutgers. Now we move into the top 15. Nothing as crazy going further out in terms of significant movements. Georgia, they did struggle against a team in South Carolina that, frankly, they gave up 9 sacks against North Carolina back in week number 1. So this is a woeful offensive line, and Georgia struggled against that team. They actually needed a big second half in order to come back and win that game. So Georgia's still undefeated. They still have all of their goals and expectations in front of them, but I am also concerned about that Georgia team. So that's why, while they were ranked number 5 in the power ratings, that's why they were moved down 6 spots, because the model was seriously concerned about how they handled South Carolina. They expected, frankly, a lot better performance. Now, going into the top 10, we do have one change here of note. LSU, it was number 18 last week. They move up 8 spots all the way up to number 10 in the Any Given Saturday top 25. So big win by LSU, opening up conference play against Mississippi State. Thought that was a game that could have been closer, maybe a 1-possession game. The model had it as -8 for LSU, but expect to be closer than what that spread says. Was not the case. LSU controlled the game from the get-go. Impressive performance, and they'll try to continue building that momentum as they dive deeper into SEC conference play. But they were actually the biggest risers of the week, so you love to see that. And then we'll close things out with the top 5. OSU, Ohio State, I think they found their identity on the offensive side of the ball. And you could sit back and scoff at that idea, like, listen, they played against Western Kentucky. I don't even know where Western Kentucky is. That's from the casual. We know where Western Kentucky is. Western Kentucky is in the Conference USA. And yeah, they are a group of 5 team, but I have them winning the Conference USA this year. This is not as much of a slouch of a team as what we saw, what we think of Western Kentucky, right? So that being said, defense looked good and the offense finally starting to find an identity. I think that's perfect that they're starting to do that because they will have a tough test against Notre Dame, which we'll talk about later. And I do have a new number one team in the country. It did used to belong to Florida State, but that is no longer going to be the case. Florida State did struggle against Boston College, nearly losing that game to Boston College. If it wasn't for a school record and penalties, then yeah, that could have been a game where we saw a big time upset. But unfortunately, Boston College was not disciplined enough. So Florida State was able to escape with the win, but they're no longer the number one team. They fell to number 5. Washington is currently the number 1 rated team in this power rating system. And Washington's been the type of team that's just been a machine to continue through this season, right? Because Washington, they started the year, they beat Boise State, could have been considered a trap game at the time, but they blew Boise State out of the water. And then they just continue to do the hard work. Most recently, beating Michigan State 41-7. We knew that offense was going to be good at Washington, but I think that defense is better than what people realize. Washington, I have my eye on you. I can't wait to see what you do in this next week. Not sure. I don't think you're on bye. Just continue the hard work.